Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us for another Tech Visionary interviews. This is a set of interviews with tech advisors. Here we have Daron Yondem. He's Microsoft Regional Director based in Istanbul, and he's specialized in cloud and anything related to that. Today's talk is about moving to cloud again, and how to calculate costs around it, and how operation costs and things like that works. Hi, Daron.
Hey, how you doing?
Great, thank you. Can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Oh, sure, but yeah, that's the hardest question, I guess. I really hate introducing myself, right? Because it feels like you're bragging about all of your accomplishments and stuff like that. So, anyways, I have to do it, right? So, I guess in the context of this recording of this session, what makes sense is that I'm working on Azure for like since 2008, which is kind of really far. I don't think 2008 Azure was old GA. It wasn't even called Azure, right? Something else. I don't remember, but I do. No, it should be called Azure because the thing that I have right now back here in my room is that I got a gift from a university where I did speak about Azure, and the gift itself has the Azure on it. So I know I was talking about Azure. So since 2008, I'm working on Azure. And since how long? Since like it's been 9 years, I guess, right now, which means 2011. I am full time working on Azure with production apps or services or whatever you call these things. So I'm full time working on it, having production, business on Azure since 2011. So, and I'm the
Great.
Microsoft Regional Director. I'm an MVP for how many years? 12 years MVP. Started with ASP.NET, switched to Silverlight. Don't ask anything about it, please. And then switched to Azure. During the last year, I got awarded in two areas: Azure plus AI. I'm getting into AI as well a little bit. So if you look at the big picture, I mean, my whole life was between at times it was the backend, at times it was the client. So I was kind of lucky to be able to accumulate on the experience from these both worlds, I guess.
Great, awesome. Thank you for the introduction. So the topic we are going to talk about today is moving to platform as a service
Mhm.
(PaaS). Just because some of our audience might not know what it is, can you explain that quite briefly? What is PaaS?
It's the life of a developer without virtual machines. Because the issue was the first time, I'm guessing we all, or we might have some I mean, I'm getting old, so we might have younger people watching us, younger than me. That's what I'm trying to say. So they might not have seen the world where you have to manage a VM to be able to deliver your app, right? To be able to host it. I mean, back in those days, and it still is a problem, to be honest, if you are on the on-prem. So that's why there's this whole concept of DevOps trying to fix that problem, right? I mean, you build an application which works perfectly on your machine, then you have to put it on a server and it doesn't work there. There are requirements, settings, and all that needs to happen. And the person who manages the VM might not even know about it. Then you might not know about it as well, but someone has to do it. And then it's not just the initial setup. You have to keep maintaining not just your code, but the all the underlying infrastructure essentially, right? The operating system, being able to patch it, being able to secure it. I mean, there was this thing called IaaS, right? I mean, now that I'm working on Azure and PaaS for like 10 years, I did forget all of that complexities, but it was there, and maybe it is, in your life today, if you didn't, move to the cloud, and you didn't move specifically to platform as a service. I mean, you can move to the cloud and still stay on infrastructure as a service, right? So in that case, you have to manage all these underlying layers. I guess the whole point to moving to platform as a service is, we developers, I call, I think we have to be a little bit, I'm trying to find the right adjective here, to be honest, but lazy. if that makes any sense. I mean, most of the time, why you do write some code is because you're lazy to do it manually, right? You want to automate things. You want to make sure, the computer can do it instead of you. So, that's one of the points where we all got into this thing, right? So, and if you look at the cloud platforms right now, my perspective is that I want to push as much as possible to someone else. A lot of the responsibility that I really don't want to focus, because me as a developer, I want to be able to build solutions. I don't want to, manage infrastructure or more maintain infrastructure. I mean, one of the examples that I usually use is that, today, if you start writing a code, right, a C# program or something, you don't really worry about if the hard drive is connected through SATA interface or something else, right? You don't really worry about what type of hard drive you have. Do you have an SSD? Do you have a hard drive? Actually disks in there? And the reason you don't have to worry about this is because of the encapsulation, right? You got this thing called operating system that handles everything for you. It abstracts away the complexities so that you can simply open up a stream and start writing into it, and it gets saved and you don't have to worry about it. That's kind of the same concept with cloud as well. I mean, you can definitely want to worry about everything. You want to go deep, maybe, I don't know. But in my case, I prefer to stay away on the higher level of the stack as much as possible, because that's where I want to live. If that's the case with you as well, I mean, platform as a service and maybe serverless, if you want to go a little bit further than that, maybe serverless will give you that, that environment where you can, stay away from the real world of hardware and in your logical world of just coding and building your solution only and being able to deliver it out there, because requirements have changed as well. I mean, today, I mean, in the past, if you go 15 years back or 20 years back, if I ask you, hey, you're going to build some type of software, and this software is going to be used from a central location by 5,000 people. So imagine where would that be? 20 years ago, I'm telling you there's going to be a central, software that is going to be used by 5,000 people. And when I ask this question, usually people tell me it is either military, right? Because you have to have some kind of a network, right? And 20 years ago, we're imagining, unless you're exceptional environment, you don't have the internet, right? So you have to have some kind of a network, and 5,000 clients, one server. It's usually 20 years ago, either military or financial institutions maybe. And think about it, how long it would take after you graduate, for example, how long it would take for you to get access to that code base. The assumption would be, right, if you have a piece of code that is being used by 5,000 clients, the assumption of a software company would be, after you graduate, you need at least 5, 10, 15 years of experience to be able to get into there, right? To be able to access the source code and be able to edit. But today, what we are doing is amazing. I mean, we're not talking about graduates. Students are building apps that are serving millions of people. I mean, you are building an iPhone app, an Android app with a cloud backend and pushing it out to the store. And then next morning, you might see millions of people downloading it and hopefully using it and paying for it. So how are you going to solve that problem at that level? You need to make it easy, right? The platforms have to make it easy. And that's why platform as a service and serverless are very important, because they abstract a lot of the complexities away. And this isn't just for students, obviously, this is for startups as well. I mean, you cannot, employ tens of people in a startup. You don't have the budget, right? And you don't want to. For big corporations, you want to save, right? You don't want to invest. Instead, you want to go and buy services instead of buying hardware and trying to maintain it. So that's where platform as a service is really helpful. And I'm not saying it's easy to go to platform as a service, but it's worth it.
Great, thank you for the
Did I
details
talk
about.
too much on just the
No,
first
no, no.
question?
That's great. Thank you for that. So based on that, like if I'm a decision maker, if I'm manager of a company, or if I'm running a startup, it helped me definitely to reduce my costs of administration. My developers can focus on building something instead of being dragged into like administration things, like let me schedule my backup, let me do this, let me do that to make this server update and anything like that. Instead of all of those, I can actually use platform as a service and get rid of all of those like extra things. So the thing for me as a decision maker then would be, okay, how can I actually evaluate these costs? How can I check the costs of operation? How can I compare it with the costs of how much it would be to run all of these things together?
It's really hard. First off, I guess before answering that question, the important thing to know before you dive into cost analysis is what do you want to monetize, right? Do you want to monetize your app? Do you want to monetize from the infrastructure as well? Because if you want to monetize from all layers, go ahead. You build your own data center. It's not a problem. You can do it. There are companies. I mean, that there are. If you look, I mean, I do have a couple of names in my mind right now, but I'm not 100% sure. But some of the companies, they did move to the cloud. Some startups, and then when they grew really big, they started building their own data centers, right? They moved out of the cloud because they want to squeeze the resources more than a public service provider can do. At the end of the day, the public service provider has to have some flexibility, right? And have to make money. But if you want to monetize from that layer as well, and if you want to squeeze and design something really specific, this goes again to the example of, you can build your own operating system. Maybe it's going to be more cost effective. I don't know. If you're going to be able to use it as much as, if you're going to get that much out of it, then go ahead and do it. But that case is very rare. So you need to decide where you want to, what layer from your business and architecture, what layer you want to make money. Once you have that decision, things are a little bit easier to finalize. That decision is a little bit easier to finalize, because if you decide, hey, I'm not trying to make money on managing servers and infrastructure, I am being pushed into it because I have to. In that case, your perspective is different. But if you want to make money out of that business, I'm going to build a team. I'm not just going to do software. I'm going to build a team, manage infrastructure, and offer that as a service as well. I want to make money out of this. Then it's a different perspective, because there's going to be a lot of unknowns, right? When you move, even if you have an app that is already in production and you have perfect, metrics about the consumption of your app from a hardware perspective. You know how much memory you're going to use. You know how many transactions you have. All the processor power that you need and everything. I mean, and not a lot of companies have this data. But let's say even if you have, the units are very different when you move to cloud. I mean, even as something as simple as, hey, you got a SQL server with so much memory usage and such a disk and such IOPS, and we're going to move to the cloud. Oh, you look at the cloud provider and they did come up with the different unit for compute. And how does that map? No way. No one is going to tell you that, right? So I guess for companies who want to move to the cloud and they're worried about their costs, which I think they shouldn't, because if you're moving to the cloud and if you're not one of these exceptional cases, which are like, based on what I'm seeing, 1 in a million, moving to the cloud should save your money. If it is not, then you are doing something wrong. Otherwise, there's a very few exceptions that it doesn't make sense to move cloud. And again, exception 1 in a million, most probably you're not there. If you're there, most probably you know about it already. So move to the cloud, and it should cause cost savings. How can you estimate? As a general answer, I would say you need to accept the fact that you cannot have an accurate estimate unless you educate yourself. What does that mean? how do you educate yourself? It's not just educating personally yourself. It's about educating your app, your platform, and everything. Which means you got to test it out. You got to put it into the cloud. You got to put some kind of a stress test or something, whatever you have, and then you got to measure it and see how much it costs. To me personally, I don't know any other way. You can definitely go into calculators, and if you are going with the infrastructure as a service, maybe it's a little bit easier. But if you're going with the platform as a service or even serverless, it's much harder to estimate, because the differentiation in how we calculate consumption is much different in PaaS and serverless compared to the old-fashioned traditional way of doing things. And that's why a lot of companies first move to the infrastructure as a service, because that's easier to estimate and that's easier to move as well. But again, if this is that easy, then that means you're not going to get a lot out of it. So there's a balance between how easy it is and how much you get out of it. If it's too easy, you're going to get less out of it. If it's really hard, then most probably you're going to get a lot out of it.
Great. So based on that, we are saying that okay, if there is a business owner, a decision maker, a CEO, a manager of a company who wants to think about moving to cloud, how much this would save them, especially on platform as a service, because there are a lot of like components involved in it. It's not like that much, let's say, easy to calculate. There are some calculators and things like that, but it won't be like probably like precise value. One best way would be to run like a test on cloud in parallel, probably in what I'm doing already, and seeing like how much the cost of that is compared to this, and based on that I can make a decision.
Yeah, it's not easy. Maybe you can use something like, I don't know, Azure Traffic Manager to redirect some of your traffic to a cloud deployment. But again, I'm suggesting you can run your app in the cloud and in your data center simultaneously at the same time, which means you have your architecture has to conform with it. You might not have that. That might be an additional cost, right? But essentially, what we're talking about is that if you really want to get as accurate as possible estimates, then you got to do some kind of a pilot.
Great. Do we have some real world case studies published somewhere explaining about some companies who moved to platform as a service, so that our audience can go and read them, watch them somewhere? Do we have something like that?
I don't have one published. I should maybe publish at one point, because um, I'm sure Google has a lot. If you go and Google it out, you can find a lot of stories out there on their website. I know that they're publishing. In the company that I worked for, we had cases where we used, for example, like it was 7 years ago, I guess. We were one of the first companies who moved into. It was during the early adoption program, actually. One of the first companies who used DocumentDB, which is Cosmos DB. And our real life use case for that was the analytics. Obviously, today things have changed a lot. Cosmos DB is still out there, but there are other things in Azure that you can consider if you're looking for an analytics platform. But back in those days, there wasn't a lot of solutions. We actually came from a RavenDB background. We had RavenDB running on VMs. Oh my God, they didn't have. Back in those days, they didn't have hosted services, so we had to run RavenDB on VMs. That's a long story. Even their licensing didn't support the concept of cloud, where you can provision a processor for 5 minutes. They were actually saying, hey, you got to buy a full license for an additional processor, even if you want to run it 5 minutes during a full calendar year, which is kind of ridiculous, right? So, but again, this was 7 years ago. I have been through 2 startups where we had cloud services out there. One of them was a middle tier in the cloud. It was all APIs. The second one is still live. It's a digital signage platform where we have APIs plus apps in various app stores. So those are my real life examples, but we don't have case studies published. But I'm more than happy if anyone is interested, feel free to ping me on Twitter, and I will be more than happy to share our experiences.
Great, awesome. Thank you for all the explanation. As the final last word, anything else you would like to mention to our audience?
Oh yeah, I mean, I do see a lot of companies investing in moving to infrastructure as a cloud instead of platform as a service, just because they're afraid of the amount of investment. And I totally understand that. I can empathize with that. But please keep in mind that the savings are huge. Trust me. If you architect your app, your solution, and there is this other discussion that always comes up is, we're going to try to stay vendor lock free, which is a little bit funny to me, and not to offend the people who want to stay vendor lock, but in my experience and what I have seen around me, I have seen very rare occasions where really solutions moved from one cloud provider to another. So, and the investment required to make an app vendor lock free is huge. I mean, you might say, hey, I'm keeping, in this container stuff with my app and I vendor lock free. No, you're not. You're using a S3 for your storage. And when you move somewhere else, you're going to need to change your API implementations for it. It's just a single example, right? There's going to be many. So when you go into a cloud provider, then you start using their other services as well, right? And every time you're using a REST API, that is, and obviously there is no way that's going to be standardized, right? In any of these vendors, they have all their own REST APIs. So whenever you see a REST API for a service that you end up using, that's a dependency. Obviously, you can abstract that, but there's a cost to that. And the final thought that I wanted to share on this one is that, think about it. Is it worth the investment? Because on the other side of the stick, what you get is if you dive deep and let you in, being really vendor lock. Right? It's not. Don't get me wrong. It's not about Azure. Again, we don't care. It's either about Google, AWS, or Azure. If you leave yourself into the platform and get yourself be vendor lock, not really worry about it. The integrations that you can do with that platform can actually help you decrease costs. Your worry of trying to stay vendor lock free is actually preventing you from optimizing your app and lowering your costs. And it is adding additional cost on your architecture and your implementation to be able to stay vendor lock free. And you are doing all this for something that might happen. Again, I have a lot of assumptions in here. I might be totally wrong. My assumptions might be totally wrong. But I just wanted to share this as a final thought. Just, I guess that what they say is food for thought, right? That's what it is.
Great, thank you for that. So if anyone wants to connect with you, I believe these links that we shared already, like the Twitter, LinkedIn, link to your RD profile would be good to connect with you. Great. Thank you everyone for watching this interview. We have more interviews in our YouTube channel and more to come. So thank you, Daron, again for your time, and goodbye everyone.
Sure. Thank you. I really enjoyed a lot. Bye.